2, 1.
New York, NY. Launch Pod starts now.
Welcome to the New York Launch Pod, the New York Press Club award-winning podcast highlighting the most interesting new startups, businesses, and openings in the New York City area. I'm your host and New York attorney, Hal Cooper-Smith, and this episode we are talking about the restaurant industry in New York. It's certainly a hot topic these days, and we speak to Mario Vivas, who started a restaurant in New York City during the COVID-19 pandemic. Not only that, he started a restaurant at the Turnstile Food Court located in the Columbus Circle subway station at a time when subway ridership was at an all-time low. Here's Mario.
I think that when it comes to small business, especially in New York City, it's about getting people's trust again. And you can never go wrong with food. There's nothing negative. Even during a crisis, people always are going to search for a delicious place that is going to make them feel good.
But before we go to the interview, if you haven't already, remember to sign up for our monthly newsletter for unique content and insights at nylaunchpod.com and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite listening app. And we have a sponsor, ResQ, New York State's premier residential rental compliance platform. Have you rented out residential property in New York State? If so, odds are you are not compliant with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act enacted by New York State in 2019. And if you don't follow the law, your tenant may be able to legally stay in the property beyond the length of the lease, plus many more consequences. ResQ is designed to solve all of those problems and more. Simply go to resqme.com and enter in some basic lease information, and ResQ takes care of the rest, so you can relax and be a more profitable landlord. That's resqme.com, REZQUEME.com. And with that, let's go to the interview. So you have a very interesting story. When did you move to New York?
I moved to New York in 2012. I moved from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
And why did you decide to move to New York in 2012?
Long story short, I think I was bored.
You were bored?
I was bored to the routine and the type of life that you could take in Buenos Aires. It's a very traditional city. I think it's not a coincidence that a lot of people name it the Europe in South America. Life can be a little bit repetitive and very based on routine.
So why New York as opposed to any place else?
Well, I think New York, when I moved 10 years ago, it still is, I think. It's like one of the cities where you can find anything you want. If you're into the arts, in the theater, the diversity in this city, it's out of this world. And I think that was the biggest attraction. But I also believe like there is a side B on New Yorkers. It's not so much about the city itself. It's about the people that lives in the city. I always saw New York as a city where you can be anything you want to be. And when you step here, you can even start a new life. And everything is like on your hands. You're the writer of your own story, so you're able to kind of reinvent yourself. So I think that the idea of reinventing myself started since the day I moved here.
So you were thinking about reinventing yourself. Did you think about reinventing yourself to open up a restaurant?
No, I never thought I was going to end up in this business, actually. When I moved here, my first job was acting gigs, and I was doing a lot of events. I would be a bartender, and then I was a wardrobe assistant for Broadway shows, and I had like 1,000 jobs a day, and it was fun. It started like an adventure, and I think that I found myself during the years.
So you were doing all these sorts of odd jobs. How did you get to starting a restaurant?
So I think like my first experience was working for a wedding planner here in Brooklyn. And she has been in the business for almost 20 years. And she was amazing. And I think I learned a lot from that and from the organizing and logistics perspective. And I got to get a lot of experience up to one day I was like, I can totally pull this off. I can do this myself. And it took me a few years, but I think that I started having little insights of what it was about. After a few years, I think I also collected the people that would be interested in hiring me. So I started doing catering for small companies and private events. And I think that led to being a restaurant owner.
So you gained experience in all of this, learning the restaurant business. What were the steps you needed to take to starting a restaurant? Because I know it is pretty intensive.
Yeah, especially during COVID. I think that this is like a whole new chapter in the whole food industry. You have to not only be smart and quick into decisions, but also be flexible. I think most restaurants didn't survive during the pandemic because they were not flexible in the way they approached the business, and they were just used to it. I mean, no one saw this coming, of course, but I believe that one of the things that made me decide to go into the restaurant business, it was the idea of finding a niche. I really wanted to bring Argentinian food to the city, which is not a big community here in New York City. Most Argentinian food businesses are in Queens, where there is a huge community, but not here in Manhattan. So because of that lack of business, I saw a big opportunity there.
And how do you develop the recipes?
Well, I think everything came out together in the right moment. If I take you a year ago, everyone was closing their business. And I think that that was one of the key decisions, to just act quickly and go to the source and try to be resourceful. While people were trying to get rid of stuff, I was buying all the appliances and equipment for my restaurant. And also, because of my background and coming from a South American country, I think that every time we saw a crisis or something going on, we always saw opportunity. So it was actually in those moments where you see like the development of a new idea, but also starting a new chapter.
So you were running towards the fire while people were running away. What has that led to now? Because cities obviously coming back, seems like office workers are coming back. How do you reflect on the decision now, particularly when it was a time when everything was a time of fear?
Oof. I think I was, like I said before, I think it was all about timing. For example, one of the most fascinating stories that I had while building up my business was that I went to a coffee shop that was around my corner in my apartment here in the city, and they were closing after 25 years. I love the food in this coffee shop. I would have breakfast like 5 times a week. So when the owner told me he was closing, I did not only purchase his appliances, but also ask him, hey, what are your chefs doing? What is your staff doing? And he told me there will be unemployed. So I'll be like, well, you can tell that I'm starting November 1st. They got a job. And I hire everyone there that lost their job. So I think it was also taking the risk, but also trying to find the right people that were looking forward to keep working. I remember like me talking to them the first day and telling them how I was going to build up my team. And they fell in love with the project, and they're here working till today. Now, during the pandemic, I found myself like in another dimension. I never thought we will be building up the store and we will get like resumes slide under the door, like tons of them weekly. And that was a big impact. I never realized how many people were looking for a job until I own a business. I think I prioritized people that had experience in the business, people that work in hotels that were in furlough, or people that were working in restaurants and bars. It was tough. It was very tough to pick, because there were so many interesting profiles and so many people that were looking to work. I just tried to prioritize those who had the experience and were able to keep up with the project that was growing during the pandemic.
So you can see the tangible benefits from going the other way when at the height of the pandemic, opening up a restaurant, getting labor, which is now problematic, getting appliances when a lot of people are selling them. But I want to talk about this in terms of the real estate decision. You decided to open up your restaurant in Turnstile, which is the food court in the Columbus Circle subway station. You opened up a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic when no one was taking the subway in a food hall with no foot traffic.
I think that very in the back of my head, I always had the hope that everything would come to normal. It will be not in the normal we used to be, but it will be eventually a new normal. You don't win if you don't take any risk at all. I mean, even when I moved to this country, I didn't have any security of anything, and I still did it. I'm still here after a decade. But I think that it was also a lot of finding the right moment and starting from small. I didn't have the expectations of growing fast. I didn't have the thirst of doing money right away. I think it was almost like starting from scratch and, baby steps. Try to grow and go week by week and try to see a small business from the small perspective and grow from there. I think that America always has this perspective of a big economy is kind of like a go big or go home. And I wish it could be like that. But I think that when it comes to small business, especially in New York City, it's about getting people's trust again. And you can never go wrong with food. There's nothing negative. Even during a crisis, people always are going to search for a delicious place that is going to make them feel good.
So how many empanadas were you serving during COVID in the subway station?
Daily or weekly?
You can choose.
Well, we ate a lot of empanadas because we were testing recipes like crazy the first month. So we ate so many bananas. But I don't know, in amounts, I guess like between 100 and 300. I think the first week we sold like 30 empanadas. That's nothing.
Right. There's not a lot of food traffic. So
No.
So were you scared at that time while you had just invested a lot to open up this restaurant?
No, I was never scared. I saw it as an adventure. I was like, okay, it can always fail. It can always go bad. I saw the other side of the story. I always thought it could not work, but we were surprised. I think that we had the first impact of having a very positive thinking when we got closer to Christmas. There was kind of like a very intern domestic tourism going on here in New York in Christmas. It was not as busy as it used to be, but that flow of visitors gave us like hope because we sold really good in December. And of course, January and February are slow months here, but we never lost. We never had like a negative or a losing month since we opened.
There's a lot of talk now about the future of the restaurant industry, labor, real estate, all the factors that go into your business. Where do you see the industry going and your business as a result of everything that is happening?
Well, I definitely think that everything's going to go into a smaller scale. Most restaurants used to have like these huge menu options. I think that's going to start being more, today they call it niche. Like if you want to go into some direction, like seafood or Asian food or these fusions, like Peruvian Asian, which is such a trend now. I mean, everyone is going to start going into smaller menus. I don't think that we're going to be dealing with this pasta, steaks, seafood all together in one menu. It's very risky in matters of produce and even staff to prep all that. I think everyone's going to go into a smaller scale. It's funny because when you see New York, when this city was founded, you always had that big Irish or Italian last name that is into the wood, that is into the bakery or the breads. And everything is going to come back to that, I believe. And it's going to start having more identity again, which is a good starting point for such a context and this type of crisis, because it is a crisis. It's an economic crisis. Small businesses are going to be hurt the most. And I think that only the ones that can negotiate with landlords and can redirect their menus and the way they approach the business, they're the only ones that will be able to survive. But it always goes back to the reinventing yourself thing. I think that you have to reinvent yourself, or in my case, and Criollas, let New York reinvent you, you know?
So where do you see the future of Criollas?
I totally see us growing around the East Coast. I would love to bring our product to different towns or cities that are not so familiar to the empanadas. I think that we would love to have more like a boutique approach and be smart in the way we grow. We need to grow, but grow small. I don't think that I would like to industrialize my empanadas and just throw it into the machine. And I don't think that's my direction for now. I love the fact that we do a handcrafted product. So I would love to keep that as a trademark. And I would like to open different locations in a small scale.
Well, that is a wonderful note to end things on. Mario Vivas, thank you very much for stepping onto the New York Launch Pod and sharing your time with us. How do people find out more about you and Criollas? Well,
you can come to Instagram at Criollas Baked, and you can find us at Turnstile, which is located on 57th Street and 8th Avenue, right by Columbus Circle Station. And we're there Monday through Saturday. So just come check it out.
And if you want to learn more about the New York Launch Pod, you can follow us on social media at NY Launch Pod, or visit us at nylaunchpod.com for transcripts of every episode. And if you are a super fan of the show, Mario, are you a super fan of the New York Launch Pod?
Yes, I am now.
He is now. And if you're a super fan like Mario,
Yes.
please leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It is greatly appreciated and does help people discover the show.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the New York Launch Pod. For more information, please visit nylaunchpod.com.